This episode is by request, and I think it's going to be a load of crap. But we'll give it a try. Excuse me. Well, I think. Alright, what was the topic? How can different people see things so differently? That's an oldie and a goodie. You know, that's one that rings through the ages. Yeah. But the request I got through, my very first request, I think I've done about 450 episodes. It's the first time anybody has asked me to speak on a given topic. But I've been asked this time by my godmother. You know, like I talk to my goddaughter and I talk to my godmother. That's like 3 generations, isn't it? So, I've been asked to bring my particular stupid brand of chatting to this topic. How is it that people can see things so differently, you know, given the same evidence to hand? You know, 2 different people, you know, are presented the same sort of set of evidence, and they can read it very, very differently. Well, there are some things that different people from vastly different backgrounds, because when they do see things differently in the scenario we're going to chat about, you know, surely it's to do with the way, you know, their life experiences and all that sort of stuff, you know, the way they are. You know, be a little bit about their makeup. Be nature and nurture, wouldn't it? You know, something like that. All right, we know that. That's obvious. All right. So it could have been a quick episode. I could have just said that, you know, nature and nurture, you know. But as a scientist, you know, we can eliminate some of the errors in the experiment to get a little closer to the answer to this question. How can people see things so differently? And you might think, how can you eliminate some of the, you know, the biases in the experiment? You know, like you've got 2 people and you present something to those 2 people. For example, and this is the one that I thought of just as I was picking up the phone, the war that is on at the moment. No, it's been recently concluded, between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I like that example because I don't give a hoot about either of those guys. Yeah, I'm not Armenian and I'm not Azerbaijani. Possibly I've got a slight, you know, unconscious bias in the direction of the Armenians because they're Christians and the other ones are bloody Muslims. Maybe that's in there. Yeah, unconscious, you know. Not consciously. I don't love Armenians, you know. I'm not a Kardashian lover. They're Armenians, I've heard. An Armenian success story, the Kardashians. From what I've heard, you know, the first generation of Kardashians went across to the United States of America, the land of opportunity, and got into waste disposal tips, you know, made a fortune. Then the next generation plowed all that wealth into meat works, so they were meat packers. The Kardashians, the meat packers, you know, before that they were the, you know, my old man's a dustman, he wears a dustman's hat and makes a hell of a lot of money, you know. Waste is huge dollars, you know. All right. Don't come too close, I'm busy. The kids. So what else have we got? And then the next generation, I think, you know, they had enough money to send their kids to law school. And the next generation was, or at least one of them, was a lawyer. You know, and a very famous one. Represented O.J. Simpson. Kardashians, the sharks, you know, the lawyers. Then the next generation after that, well, they're celebrities. Now, you don't get that often with families. 4 generations. And each of them have taken a step forward. Normally there's a generation that blows it all. It's usually the second generation. But the Kardashians, they've dealt themselves 4 aces in a row. I don't know what the next generation's going to do. Maybe the next generation will blow it. You never know. But you know what? I'll bet you the current Kardashians kind of lean in the direction of the Armenians in the Armenia versus Azerbaijan war at present. But I don't know that. Hey kids, can you rack off for a second? No, seriously. Go on. And why would they lean? If they do lean towards, look, if they don't lean towards Armenia, they'd be unusual. But if you discover that you're, if you go and do a DNA test and find out you're X, Y, Z, that you're Azerbaijani, which is what I did recently. I went and got a DNA test, and I found out I was 100% Azerbaijani, and that's why I'm kind of on the side of the Azerbaijanis in this war. Well, that didn't happen, but if it had happened, it might have been the case, and this is how people see things very differently depending on all sorts of factors, I'm not laying them out in order here. You'll have to sift through this episode to see what the hell I'm talking about. If I was doing a presentation on PowerPoint, I'd have to list all this stuff in an organised way. You're getting the disorganised way. Coffee addict. So, that's, what are we talking about? The Kardashians. Oh, of course we are, because we're talking about Armenia versus Azerbaijan. Now, look, in actual fact, as distinct from semi-fact, I listened closely to the Armenia versus Azerbaijan war as it played out. Look, it was a disputed territory between the two lands, two cultures that go back and back and back so far that you can't really say whose land is that, So I think 30 years ago or something, there was a dispute over that little piece of land, and international powers had to step in, and Armenia was granted that land. I think that's the case. Quite a while ago. But times change. Now the dispute has arisen again, and this time it's the Azerbaijani who've gone to the Turks and the Russians. It looks like the United States didn't want to get involved, because they had an election on. So they're not going to get involved when they've got an election on. They only care about stuff when it affects them. But anyway, the Russians and the Turks have stepped in, and they've ruled in the favour of the Azerbaijanis. This time, they got their own politics, and Turkey's trying to crawl up, Russia's arse at the moment, buy a few arms from them and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on at the moment. Don't worry about all that. But there's always geopolitics. Anyway, so we've had Armenians living there for quite a long time, and right now they're burning their houses. Not all of them. Some of them, quite a lot of them, are burning their houses because they've been ordered to leave this disputed territory. So they're burning their houses because they don't want the Azerbaijani people to have the enjoyment of their houses. And they're kissing their houses goodbye. I saw a picture of that. And they're digging their ancestors up. Granny died last week. They're digging her up. Half decomposed. And putting her gravestone on a truck and the remains, and they're not going to leave Granny there with those bastards. This is how wars go, But how can those two cultures see that disputed territory so differently, And even in the conduct of the war, I was listening to BBC reports coming through as the war was being played out. There isn't any footy on at the moment, so I was listening to that. And I heard, now, I'll show my ignorance here, but I I don't know what the structure of the politics of the two countries are, the structures. But let's just say it's a prime minister on either side. It could be a president. But the prime minister of Azerbaijan, the BBC reporter went, and now we've got the same evidence here. We've got rockets flying both ways in this battle. There was a real war, and there were rockets going that way and blowing up stuff on the Armenian side. And there was Armenian rockets going that way and blowing up stuff on the Azerbaijani side. And me, as an Australian who doesn't give a hoot about Armenia or Azerbaijan, or about the two sides in any war going on at the moment in the world, I don't care. I take an interest. I'm a curious kind of guy, but I don't actually. I'm not on anybody's side in any war around the world at the moment. Maybe if Australia gets into a war, I might be on the other side. What if we get in a war with the indigenous peoples? I might actually get on the side of the indigenous people. Whoa! Did you like that? I dropped it almost, and I caught it. I'm pretty. I actually did. I had it balancing on one finger there. Oh, there you go. Let's see, I've got a shirt about Rome on there. I studied Rome for a long time. I'm studying Ethiopia a lot at the moment, but I've studied all these different places, Greece and all that sort of stuff. And after studying the Romans for a long time, I grew to really dislike them. A bunch of bastards. It's just like organised mafia. It was institutionalised mafia. There's about 5 families running the whole of Rome. I'm talking Rome from Britannia all the way through to Armenia. Armenia was always a buffer zone back then. History goes back a long way. Armenia was kind of a buffer zone between the Persians and the Romans. Anyway, that's how far the history goes back. And sometimes, look, I'm not going to get into Roman history. But the disputed territory that is disputed at the moment, stuff was happening way back then that was relevant. That's how deep these conflicts go. We in the West, we hear about a conflict like this over in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we think, why can't people just love each other and get along, Why did they split it in half? It goes back thousands of years, neither side is right and neither side is wrong, and both sides are right and both sides are wrong. So how do they see it so differently? Well, because they're on one side or the other. So we've got 3 parties here. We've got the Aussie, me, sitting in his shed. And, I'm just curious, maybe in 30 years from now, the Armenians will get that piece of land back again, because 2 different superpowers will jump in and mediate, and say, well, it really is the Armenians' land, It is the Armenians' land. But it's also the Azerbaijanis' land as well. See, there are 2 different truths there. Look, we all know that one. And it's clear. So we've got 3 parties there. We've got me, who doesn't care. And then we've got the Armenians, who do care. The Azerbaijanis, who do care. And, well, we know what's going on there. Or take, excuse me, just got a text message coming through. Right. I may get interrupted here and make this part 1 and the next one part 2. Because the kids are bugging my wife now inside because I sent them away. I should have kept them down here. Yeah, that wasn't very good teamwork. All right, now. So how do they see things so differently? Well, now I have noticed that they do see things very differently. Like even in the thick of a battle, So the BBC was interviewing the Armenians, and the Armenians go, and a good reason why they were crying to people dying, It's actually gruesome, And it took the BBC to show them the churches, and the churches had been all bombed and all that sort of stuff. The BBC reporter said, that's bad. And the Armenians said, that's because the other mob are complete bastards, Oh, crikey, said the BBC reporter, but didn't buy into it because, they've got a code of conduct, they've got a, what do they call it? A set of rules. Yeah. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, so the BBC then went across to the Azerbaijani side, and yeah, those bastards, oh yeah, because they're getting killed too. Now both of them were right; they were both bastards, but I suppose they see things differently in as much as this mob is going to point out all the bastard acts that this mob's doing, and I haven't really added much in this episode yet. This is exactly what you'd expect anyone to say on this topic, isn't it? But I will add something, I'm sure. This is all obvious stuff. So, when I hear a war going on and I hear someone talking from the perspective of one side of that war, I kind of know what's going on. That person has ended up on that side of the war. By an accident of birth. Usually they've been born into that thing. Because I'm sure the DNA between Armenians and Azerbaijani are a bit mixed by now. So I doubt that you could have a baby born to a couple of Armenian parents and get adopted out to the Azerbaijanis, into an Azerbaijani family, and grow up hating the Armenians. Is Erdogan, the leader of the Turks, is he a little bit Greek, historically, in his DNA? I think so, but he's very, he'd like to see Greece wiped out because he's been brought up a Turk, You get that, and he was involved, by the way, in all these shenanigans in Armenia and Azerbaijan recently. All right, so there's all that. But anyway, they went over and, they interviewed the Prime Minister of Azerbaijan, and what an interview that was. If only I could just play it to you right now. But he was saying, come and see all these mosques that have been bombed, the bastards. It was the same interview as the Armenians interview. There was no difference from me. So I was none the wiser. But both he and the other guy on the other side, they were both passionate about what a bunch of bastards the other mob was. All right, so there's that. And then the BBC tried to do the right thing and said, well, what do you say about what the Armenians are saying about you? And he said, fake news. And the BBC reporter said, what do you mean fake news? It's all fake news, he said. It was a really amazing interview. He just said it straight to the camera. There was no camera. It was radio. But you know what I mean. And she said, well, we had BBC reporters who actually saw a church being bombed, and saw the rockets coming from your direction. He said, fake news. And he said, well, it could have been an accident anyway. And he said, but, and it could have been, it would have been an accident, he said. And she said, and then we saw another rocket coming, and from the same direction, and bombed the same church again. He said, another accident, maybe, we just go for military installations, we don't bomb churches. And he said, I don't think, anyway, the reports you got in from those reporters are probably fake news anyway. And she said, they're our reporters. And he said, fake news. And she said, no, I know them, she said. They're my colleagues in the BBC, I know them. No, he said, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. That'd be fake news. She said, and she let that go. He just ran with fake news. Because, thanks, Donald Trump, for that one. It's like, just say it like you mean it. It doesn't have to be true. He started something, and maybe, look, people have been doing it forever, even back in Rome. Okay, so there's that. People see things differently now. Why are they seeing things differently there? Well, it's the accident of whose side you end up on. That baby that was born to the Armenian parents and ended up in Azerbaijani. So there's that. Now, there's also this situation where there's me coming into this war cold. Into this hot war cold, Now, here's another scenario. I have a certain amount of logic in my head and cultural upbringing. I have nature and nurture all spinning around in my DNA and all that sort of stuff, and in my brain and all that sort of thing. All right, I'm a package coming into this war cold. Now, as it turns out, I know no Azerbaijanis and I know no Armenians, except Kim Kardashian, but she's not returning my call. Bitch. Neither's Kanye, but he's not Armenian. But imagine I met someone, an Azerbaijani in Melbourne, and got very close to that person. Now, that's different from being adopted out at birth and being biased. Slowly, I would start becoming biased, I think. In a short space of time, I may think I'm not being biased, but I'll be hearing one side of the story all the time. I go, oh, the mosques, you know, and I'll know the churches got bombed too, but this person will be explaining why the rockets coming from this side were justified and the rockets coming from that side are not as justified, you know. And the motivations of this Prime Minister were a lot more the greatest good for the greatest amount of people, and this guy over here is just looking after himself, you know. And this guy's probably on the take as well, and he's on a power trip and all that sort of stuff. And this guy over here, I would be hearing this stuff over and over and over again, that this guy is basically more noble, even if they're doing the same actions, rockets, 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 and all that sort of stuff. I'd be saying the Azerbaijani guy, his motivations for sending those rockets are more noble than that guy's motivations for sending those rockets, because that guy's Hitler. This guy, you know, I was going to say Churchill, yeah, but he's a complete bastard too. But, you know, we're only starting to realise that now, aren't we? No, we're not. Yeah, great guy. You know, we shall fight them on the beaches, you know. Okay, so there's that. You know, if England had lost that war, Churchill was calling them, the English, to an insurgency with that speech. You know, we shall fight them on the beaches. You know, if you listen to the whole thing, it's just, listen, if you beat us in a war, we're going to become illegal insurgents. You know, there's nothing wrong with illegal insurgents if it's you. All right. So that's that. So you can, you know, because the temptation is to say, well, you know, if there's a war on somewhere in the world, one person is seeing it more correctly than another person as a result, because that person's thinking more clearly than the other person and has studied world history a bit more and is smarter and is a better arguer and all, you know, in his or her own head and all that sort of stuff. But I removed all that like a scientist would, and made both the people that I'm looking at, you know, the two people who are seeing things differently, I made them both me then. I made them both me. I imagined becoming friends with an Azerbaijani and starting to see the Azerbaijani side even more than I see the Armenian side of the argument. Even if, you know, and I'm very arrogant, I like to say, no, I would still be unbiased, you know, but it wouldn't be the case. There's unconscious bias, you know, and it would slip in, I'm sure. I'm not immune, you know, and even if I leaned, as a result of this, 0.01% to the Azerbaijani side, it's still bias. You know, so I'm still seeing things differently. You know, there's still two people here. Me, had I met an Azerbaijani and become friends with that person, and me, had I met an Armenian and become friends with that person. There's two different people here, and they're seeing things differently. Admittedly, only a tiny bit, you know, because I only just met this person. I'm only just starting to hear the story. But imagine I was friends with that person for 3 years, talking to them every day. I think I would start really seeing everything. You know, that Armenian guy over there would start looking like Hitler to me. I think that's it. You know, I think that's one of the reasons. That's how people see things so differently. You know? There are other... Now, that takes out of the equation personal gain, per se, and personal nature and nurture. You know, I think that's the only way to look at it, to see, in essence, how and why people see things so differently. There are obvious ones. If you've got two different people from two different... Like, why did the Russians see it from the Azerbaijani side of things more than the Armenian side of things? And why did the Turks too? You know, the Russians are kind of Christians in the same way that Armenians are Christians, really. But they saw there was probably some, you know, geopolitical advantage for Russia. You know? Why did the Turks get on the Azerbaijani side on this occasion too? Well, you know, maybe it was a Muslim thing. You know, they're our Muslim mates. The Armenians are a pack of Christian bastards, you know, all that sort of stuff. Or maybe there was some money involved. Maybe there's all that stuff. But I removed all that from the equation earlier. But all those things are a factor in why people see things so differently. A huge, if you take my scenario out of the equation there, a huge factor, you know, because in my example, you know, I'm starting to identify with one side more than the other. See, that's one thing. But all right, let's take that one. There's another scenario here. It's personal interest. You know, all these things layer. I'm glad this is not structured like a PowerPoint presentation, because all these things weave in together. We're a complex thing, we humans. There wouldn't be any such fight, you know, between lions and gazelles as to who's in the right. You know, because gazelles, you know, just very unilaterally see that they have a right to run away very fast and not get caught. And lions see that they have a God-given right to chase and chase and chase and, you know, the neck, you know, rip that bloody gazelle's neck apart, you know, and all that sort of stuff. Which sounds really violent, but there are wars going on at the moment where humans are doing that to each other too. Absolutely just hacking limbs off. You know, they've found, you know, there's another war on somewhere, don't worry about it where it is, but there was a massacre there recently, you know, and they found all the body parts. Just lovely. Find it hard to criticise lions because the humans involved there didn't even eat the victims, you know. Anyway, now there are other factors at play. I find personal interest is huge. You know, the funny thing about, you know, personal interest, where you stand to gain in some way, shape, or form, money, fame, whatever. You stand to gain if a certain outcome occurs compared to a certain other outcome is concerned. Personal benefit is absolutely huge, and this is one I do find, and I'm sure I'm as guilty as anyone on this. If it's Labor versus Liberal in an election, we're pretty open about it. Most of the pitching of the political debate is at how are you going to go. Now, I know people who've got what the Greeks call philotomo. The person I've got in mind is a Greek, yeah? And he's saying it's not about me, it's about what's best for the country. So he's one sort of person, but then there's other. I think the fact that politicians try and appeal to how you're going to benefit if you vote for me, know that selfishness is a big factor. But the funny thing is, when people go and tell other people why they're voting Liberal or Labor, they tend to say, you know, they list all the noble reasons why they're doing that, but just by coincidence, what they honestly think is the best thing for the global good, the country, happens to align beautifully with whatever tax bracket they're in and all that sort of stuff. So there's that. Now, there's another sort too. Look, we're just assuming, see? There was a presupposition in the original question. How do people see things so differently? Well, they don't see all things so differently, do they? There's general widespread agreement that if an apple falls from the tree, if an apple falls from the tree, it falls down. People don't see that all that differently. So matters of physics are generally well agreed upon. Yeah. You know, whether you're Christian, Muslim, or secular, or Buddhist, or whatever, you know, everyone in the whole wide world seems, except for a very few, there's always freaks. We'll leave freaks out of the equation. seem to agree that force equals mass times acceleration, for example. Newton's laws, or Maxwell's laws, and all sorts of other things. E equals mc squared, Einstein, all that sort of stuff. Most people saw Hiroshima and kind of figured out what was going on there, So physics is well agreed to. And I think more and more as time goes on, people are starting to realise that the Earth is not 6,000 years old. It's, what is it? Is it 3.7 billion years old or something like that? I can never remember. See, I'm shocking at this. I think the whole universe is 4.7 billion years old and the Earth is 3.4 billion years old or something like that, which is actually amazing in a way because, not long after the universe came into being, then the Earth was already spinning around, the Earth was here. It's amazing. There's rocks in Western Australia. We're the oldest continent, I think, geologically settled and all that sort of stuff. And we've got rocks that date back to 3 billion years ago, I think, which is actually more than halfway, or 3 point something billion years ago, which is more than halfway back here in Australia. This old country, the oldest. All the countries are old. But we are geologically stable. This country, you're living on ancient land here. Gondwana land, and it's, you can go and touch that rock, and you're touching something that came to land there somehow. More than halfway back to the dawn of time itself and the Big Bang, which wasn't much of a bang apparently. The big silent expansion, because in space sound doesn't carry, so it can't be a bang, can it? That was the Big Bang. Silent. All right. So now there's not much disagreement on the fact that the universe is expanding, because some woman in Bletchley House or whatever it is in, I don't know, noticed. She was looking at all the negatives of the stars, and she said, "Hey, the universe is expanding." Was it Halley? The physicist, and he said, "Oh, give me that information. Hey, I've just had a discovery, everybody." Took all the credit. Look, he did deserve the credit. I think it was him. I get all my physicists mixed up. I don't get Alexander Graham Bell mixed up, though, as far as I know. And I think there was a congressional hearing about this in the United States of America, but Alexander Graham Bell has had all the glory and got a lot of money at the time, too, for inventing the telephone. I think someone down the hall did, and he flogged it. How can people see things so differently? Because I'm sure when he was spruiking that telephone that he stole, the telephone idea, I'm sure, self-interest, I bet he honestly thought he did. But they've done forensic bloody detective examination, and even in, I don't know how they register these things in America, and they had a congressional hearing or something to investigate the history of this business of the invention of the telephone, and they found out that Alexander Graham Bell was a great big thief. Ideas thief, Look, he added bits and pieces, but for him we wouldn't have had such a good telephone service, because he was a bit of a businessman too, obviously, because part of being in business is stealing and getting away with it, and so is writing songs. All right, and poetry, rap. You can become a good rapper. What you do, I figured this out. I had a go. But what you do is you grab an existing rap song and take the rhythm, because there's only these various set rhythms, and then you just plug words and make them rhyme at the right spots and get the emphases going at the right spot, and you've got a rap song, and you come across, wow, you're a good rap writer, I just could never get the accent, because I'm not a rapper. I'm a rapper. What's his name? Now, there was Kerry Ann Kennelly, and a lesser-known light. Will Smith was getting interviewed by Kerry Ann Kennelly from Australia here, and she said, "So you're a rapper?" And he said, "You say that again?" She said, "You're a rapper?" He said, "A rapper? I'm a rapper. I've never been a rapper before. I thought I was a rapper." You're not saying I'm a rapper. He just got tickled pink. It tickled his fancy, the way she just said it, because we've got this totally puncy way of saying things, we Australians, clearly, Anyway, so Alexander the Graham Bell, he was a great big thief, but he thought he wasn't, probably. Self-interest. But, getting back to science, once there's widespread agreement on something like, Newton's laws of motion or all that sort of stuff, apples falling consistently down from a tree, and all that sort of stuff, and planetary motion. And only, there's only one country where most people think the world is 6,000 years old, and that's the same country that currently thinks that wearing masks is an infringement on your freedom. We had a Christmas photo yesterday with my kids and Santa, and they've all got masks on, and their freedom wasn't being infringed. They were proud to do their duty. Americans. If you're going to listen to YouTube clips from America about what makes sense and what doesn't, from comedians, whether they be on the left or the right, or politicians who are comedians on the left and the right too, when they're from America, just remember, I think they had a poll once in America that despite all the evidence of paleontology and all that sort of stuff, a majority of Americans still think that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. Is that true? How can people see things so differently? What's going on there? Because it's not like America's uneducated. What is going on there? I don't even want to answer that one. Let's ignore the Americans, But when you're listening to influencers from America, just remember that most Americans believe the Earth is 6,000. And you've got the dinosaur bones right there. They're just right there. And even if carbon dating was wildly wrong, which it just can't be, if you get into it on how carbon dating works, because you can actually test it going back a little way, carbon dating, and then you see the dinosaur bones are doing something dramatically different than the tests you're doing on carbon dating, only a fair few thousand years ago, and then you say the dinosaurs were 65 million years ago. There's no two ways around it. And yet, people can believe what they want to believe. What's the self-interest there? It's probably religious, so that'd be another whole angle which I haven't got time to talk about. But look, there are things that most people agree on, so they're out of the equation, like science. Most of the world is into science. We don't have a Galileo, but even in Galileo's time, there was widespread disagreement on whether the Earth was round and all that sort of stuff, and the planets and the moons were going around Jupiter or not. But we gradually become educated, and science has won the day on some levels. So there are some things that people agree on, and there are some things that people disagree wildly upon, and they're the ones that are interesting for the purpose of this episode. But I think I've spoken enough. I don't know whether I answered the question or not. Why do people see things so differently? Why did you listen to me anyway on this topic? There's really smart people that know all about this. They're called psychologists. Go and ask them. Don't ask me. You wasted your time. 39 minutes and 4 seconds that you'll never get back.